2 for writing in the media. Generating ideas. This is what we're going to cover in this lecture. Where the ideas come from, how to develop them, how to research them, how to write them up, and then how you turn that into an article. So, where do those ideas come from? Well, we're surrounded by input, stimulus, sensory input every single day. Even while we're sitting at home, stuck in lockdown, we're still surrounded by lots and lots of stimulus. And that means that we can actually start thinking about how some of those stimulating thoughts and ideas could get turned into a piece that we could write. So it could be that you're looking on Facebook, you might be a member of a local Facebook group. So you might be looking at some local issues. This is a local issue that's come up in my local Facebook group, people complaining about loud fireworks over the New Year's Eve period. And of course, you know, loud fireworks can upset some pets. So someone has shared this link about low noise fireworks. And there are increasingly more and more companies that produce these low noise fireworks. And as it says, they focus on pretty colours and so on. So, you know, this has the potential to become an idea that could be worked up into an article about fireworks and about how they upset pets and other animals. There might also be a post that you come across on any form of social media that you're on that might be about nostalgia. So this one is about old bands. And here we've got a picture of the band Duran Duran, and it says there that, you know, them as well as the Human League, Depeche Mode, these British new wave bands, classic records turn 40. So, you know, this is something that, again, people might want to read about and certainly write about too. There might also be perhaps something local to you that you might have noticed, maybe if you're out taking a walk, that is perhaps slightly mysterious. So this is my personal Instagram feed, and this is a picture that I took of a strange little doorway at a local church, and I had no idea what this doorway was, set into the outside of the church wall. So again, this is something that, you know, it intrigued me. And why not write about things that intrigue us? And what about the weather? That's a constant topic of conversation in the UK. And it could be that there is bad weather coming. You know, that it's winter time. This is not unexpected or uncommon, but, you know, there could be a tweet or a Facebook message or an Instagram message that talks about bad weather coming. So, you know, maybe there could be a piece there about what we do with the bad weather and how we cope with it. So you might have seen something that triggers a vague idea. So how do you go from having this fairly vague idea and thinking that's quite interesting? How do you develop that? So going back to that local piece, so the local Facebook group complaining about loud fireworks upsetting pets. What do we do with that? Well, we start first of all by writing down possible ideas that could come out of that. And as you can see there, the things that I've suggested. Why are more people setting off fireworks now rather than, say, on the 5th of November, fireworks bonfire night, or New Year's Eve? Why are people doing it at additional times? And, you know, that would be quite an interesting piece to perhaps look at the history of fireworks, you know, from their development in China, and then perhaps looking at how they've been used in the UK, and maybe a little bit of historical background on the 5th of November and Guy Fawkes and the attempt to blow up the Houses of Parliament. And then we'll if that's how it started here in the UK, why are we now seeing more fireworks being used at different times of the year? And again, that may well go back to reminding us about fireworks invention in China. So also, what can pet owners do to help frightened animals? That could be a different angle. How can we deal with this? That the fireworks are already out there, we can't stop them, so what can we do to actually help our pets? What about environmental effects of fireworks? There was a piece in one of the local newspapers a couple of weeks ago about how a huge number of fireworks had been let off along the coastline, and all of the casings had just been scattered. And these are plastic casings, and this was right on the shoreline. These were likely to end up washed into the sea. So, there are definite long-term environmental effects of fireworks. And then, are there any alternatives? Maybe not just to the loud fireworks, but maybe also to the plastic casings and so on. So, there are a number of different angles that you can come at this particular idea from. It doesn't just have to be a single point of view about, the alternatives to loud fireworks. There are more ideas potentially in a piece that could be about fireworks, just from that one single post noticed on Facebook. The one about nostalgia, about old bands, what can we do with that? Again, there are a number of different aspects that we could look at. Each of them could be worked into a separate article. So, where are the bands now? What are they? Are they still actually producing music? Are they doing tours? Is it just a nostalgia tour that they're doing? What do they look like now? Are they all still alive? Have some of them left music completely? So, that where are they now type post can be really interesting. Where are their original fans now? And this, again, would be a case of speaking to people that having a look again around on social media, and also, does the music stand the test of time? If you're somebody that's perhaps, in your teens or your 20s, listen to some of this music that came out 40 years ago. And I have to say, that really horrifies me that it was 40 years ago. Does it still sound like contemporary music, or does it sound very, very dated? Where can we hear these bands now? Do they have a presence on various different musical websites? Not just the standard ones of iTunes and Spotify, but, are they on Bandcamp or anything like that? Does the fashion still work? Would we still dress like that? Are there elements that we think, actually, that's quite cool still? And again, each of these has the potential to be an article in its own right. These are just angles that you could come at this story from. And with the history mystery, that little doorway in the wall of the church, what could we do with that? Well, again, lots of different possibilities. We could do some research. What's the historical significance? What is that little doorway? And then what about local people? Do they know about this? What do they think about it? Has anybody really noticed it recently? Is it something that everybody knows about, perhaps? And maybe you're the last one to discover this. How has life changed since this was used? Is there still a need for this? What is it? So once you find out what it is, then you can start looking at how maybe life has changed and whether there's still a call for it in, now fairly secular Britain compared to when the church was built and when that little doorway was in regular use. So, and who used it? Why did they use it? So that, of course, links back to the historical significance. But, there's the historical significance of the wider church and other people around the country who perhaps use this type of door, and then also the local significance. Who used this particular door? Why did they do it? What was their daily life like? And so on. So, again, lots of different aspects that you can come at this from. And of course, it depends on where your interest lies. Now, that weather piece, what about that? Again, different possibilities. What's the government doing to prepare for bad weather? And then looking at the wider governmental responses to in the UK to bad weather. Also, sort of a very scientific and meteorological aspect that you could look at. What actually happens in a storm? What causes a storm? And writing all of that in a way that would be simple and straightforward and understandable to the general reader. What should pet owners do? You know, if your pets are trapped outside in it, if they get frightened by storms, you know, all of those sort of advising ideas. And also, what can we do? Is this perhaps linked to climate change? Is there something that we can do then? Or, you know, are there things in the very short term that we can do to prepare ourselves for particularly bad weather coming? So again, lots of different angles that you can come at this same story from. So you've got that initial idea, you've thought of different angles that you could approach it from, but now you need to start researching that idea. And what I would recommend to start with is that even if you think to yourself, actually, I'm more interested in one particular aspect, obviously you would just choose one of those topics. So, you know, it would be either the nostalgia piece or the weather piece, or, you know, even though there might be multiple different things that you find, obviously do them one at a time. But let's say, for example, you're deciding that you want to look at that weather piece and you've thought of, as we saw, 4 different possibilities, 4 different angles. So the first thing that I would be doing is looking at following up, researching each of those angles. Even if I thought to myself, I think actually I'll probably be going with the government preparations and climate change and so on, I would still be looking at the other aspects too, because it could be that the government line may not actually have as much in it to make a really interesting article, or it could be as well that I want to maybe bolster it with some of the other aspects. But, you know, quite often, and I've certainly had this myself, I have a very fixed idea in my mind and I think, yes, I'm absolutely going to write an article about X and it's going to look at it from this particular angle. I start looking at that particular angle and realise that's just not going to work. And actually, I need to investigate some of the other possibilities about that same topic. So, you know, that's the thing. Don't close things down at the beginning. Keep your research wide and do a lot of it. So, how do you do that research? Well, this, of course, is part of the graduate skills that will equip you for graduating and getting a job in the real world. It is part of your existing skill set. You already know how to do this. You know how to go to a library, and either the physical library and go and ask, or go and look online and put in the right search terms. That's the thing. It's absolutely about getting those right search terms, and the more that you do that, the better you get at it. And also, don't forget, Google is there, and we have the sum total of human knowledge sitting in our pockets, on our mobile phones. If we have an internet connection, we can find out pretty much anything. And of course, we can ask people. So, don't overlook asking people. Even in this current lockdown situation, you can email people, and, don't be afraid of emailing experts. So, for example, if it was the piece about the weather and you decided that you wanted to know a little bit more about meteorology, of course, do your basic groundwork. Have a look online, look in the library, look on the library website, do all of those sorts of basic preparation and research. And then perhaps if there is maybe one aspect that you really get very interested in and you discover that there is somebody who is a leading expert on this, it could well be that you discover that they teach perhaps at a university wherever in the world, there's nothing wrong with emailing them and asking them questions. Most academics, it might take them a little while, but most academics will actually respond to you and, respond to your questions, particularly if you point out that you're an undergrad and that you are writing an article on this subject. But likewise, freelancers and, writers do, after they've left university, or even those that don't go to university, they do actually send emails to academics saying, I understand that you're the expert on this, how does this work, and they ask. It's okay to do that. What's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is that they don't respond to you, but at least you tried. The best that can happen is that they come back to you and they give you all the information and they perhaps give you lots of new ideas of how to approach this particular story. So, don't be afraid of asking people. So, what has already been written about the subject? So, you've maybe got a better idea, you've done some of the basic groundwork, but you need to have a look. And this is perhaps before you contact anyone. What's already been written about this subject? So this is where you definitely go and Google things. You look at what different newspapers have perhaps written about this subject, magazines, are there specialist magazines that cover this subject? And if you want something that is maybe underpinned by expert knowledge, I would definitely go and have a look at something like Google Scholar, and that will give you very much the academic, the expert opinion, and the expert knowledge on things. So you gather all of that together. And as it says there are many online tools that will help with this. So it could be that you just bookmark everything. If you've got particularly a favourite bookmarking app, or it could be that you're maybe using something as simple as a Word document to keep everything in. Although I have to say that wouldn't be my recommended way forward. I would be inclined to use something like a bookmarking app, something maybe like Evernote or similar, and I'll talk about that in a moment. It may be that you just want to write everything down. If you do write things down, make sure that you take note of the web page that you found things on, the date, the person that wrote it, and so on. Because, and I know that seems like something really, really obvious, but I can't tell you how many times I've come across something that I thought, oh, that's quite interesting, and I haven't remembered to note it down, to bookmark it, in any way or in any form at all. And then a few days later, I've suddenly realised that particular bit of information was key. And now I've got to try and trawl back through my browsing history and find it. So, keeping clear notes is so important. And this is, again, part of those graduate skill sets. This is also something that you will be using for those of you that are currently doing dissertations. Keep clear notes. And particularly for those of you considering going on to do master's qualification next year, again, this is something really, really important. Keep clear notes. I absolutely cannot encourage you to do that anymore. It's so important. Okay, so what about those notes? What's the best tools to use? And it could just be simple paper and pencil, paper and pen, that's fine. But if you're going to do that, then I really recommend that you have a specific notebook that you do that in, and also that you take photographs or scans of your pages. And again, there are online apps that will allow you to do that simply. So, as it says, don't forget to take photos. This is not just of your handwritten notes, although something like Evernote will allow you to do that. It will actually scan a page of notes, and then that page of handwritten notes will be searchable by words, by keywords. So Evernote is a really excellent bit of kit, and it's the basic form is free, so really worth having that. But also, if you go out for a walk and there's something that, like my strange door in the wall of the church, take photos. If something interests you, take photos. Allow yourself to be curious. And also try out new note-keeping apps. have a look and see what's out there. It's more than just a sort of virtual notepad. There are lots of different ways that you can keep notes online and on your mobile phones. Of course, use paper and pens, use notebooks, particularly if you're somebody a bit like me who's a stationery junkie. Absolutely keep notebooks and handwritten notes if that's what works for you. But I would definitely mix it up and have some apps, some online ones as well, because the online ones are likely to last for many, many years, and notebooks sometimes sadly get lost, thrown away, and just sort of, fall apart. Draw diagrams. Even if you think, well, I'm not any good at art, that doesn't really matter. You're drawing something to remind yourself. And the best way to see something clearly is to draw it. And, do whatever works for you. And definitely don't throw things away. I've already mentioned Google Scholar and I've mentioned Evernote. The other one that's in there in the middle, Google Alerts. This can be extremely useful if you are looking at something that is ongoing and you want to be informed every time there is new information about it. You can actually do this. It's part of the whole Google sort of raft of different tools that they have. If you have a Google account, which most people do, you can actually sort of drill down into it and it will it'll email you an alert whenever the keywords that you've selected, whenever they appear online somewhere. Excuse me. So that can be really, really useful. And I would definitely recommend doing that if it's a long-term project. So, how do you write up this idea? You've got all of this information. You've got it in notebooks, you've got photographs, you've got drawings, you've got diagrams, and you really know a lot about the subject by now. How do you write it up? Here's the basic writing process. Read your notes. Put the notes away. And then close the door, switch off your phone and the internet, and write your first draft. And this first draft is only ever seen by you. So don't worry about the spelling, the grammar, or the accuracy in this first draft. This is simply a process of turning your head out. And the reason why I say put your notes away is because you don't want to be hampered by constantly looking back and thinking, well, what did I write there? And what am I saying here? Do all of that when you're reading your notes. And also I would recommend that this is a really good process for a first draft of an essay too. Read all your notes, put your notes away, then get on to writing that first draft without interruption. And as I say, that first draft, don't worry about spelling, the grammar, the accuracy, and so on. There's a great quote from Ernest Hemingway who said that first drafts are always shit. And, he's right, because it's not about having something that is finished and polished at the first go. It's about simply getting stuff down onto paper. And until you've got something on paper, you have nothing to redraft and nothing to craft, nothing to shape. And if you make sure that that first draft is only seen by you, hopefully your internal critic will shut up, because you don't want your critic to be saying, well, that's not a well-constructed sentence, or that's spelt incorrectly, or, that's not in the right order. It doesn't matter. You're just getting stuff down. That's all. When you've done that, go and have a coffee, which is my personal thing that I generally do. Somehow take a break. And that break could be 15, 20 minutes, or it could be, depending on when your deadline is, could be a day or two, or longer. And certainly if you're somebody that writes fiction, that break may well end up being a week or 2 weeks or longer. But if you're writing non-fiction and the turnaround tends to be quite tight and you've got deadlines coming up, that break may only be perhaps 20 minutes or an hour, or an afternoon. Then you get on to your second draft. So this is when you've come back, you're refreshed, you read through your first draft, and do it without criticising yourself. It's your first draft, and it's at this point when you're putting together your second draft that you can start to begin to shape it. So you organise the sentences for thematic sense. So at this point, you're not necessarily rewriting sentences, instead, you're just organising them. So all of the ones about a particular aspect, you put them all together. So this is essentially organising your paragraphs. Then, after you've done that, you've got your paragraphs, you now organise those for your overall narrative. How does one paragraph follow to the next? Is this one that you've put perhaps at the beginning, is that the right place for it to be? So think about that overall narrative. How does this hang together? Does this lead from one idea logically to the next? Then you check your facts and your research, and you begin to add in or take out details. And this second draft process may actually take a considerable amount of time. That first draft may have only taken you 20 minutes, half an hour to write, because it was probably fairly quick and quite rapidly written, full of lots of interesting ideas, but nothing really developed. The second draft is where you begin to develop it. You organise things, and you, as it says there, you check your facts. That's where you then go back to all of the notes, you draw that in, you put those into the right places. And in the second draft, your piece may well double in size from that first draft, and you've got something that is far longer, has got an awful lot in it, and is still not a finished piece. When you've done all of that and you've put everything in, and you think, okay, so that looks like a rough version of what might end up as the final draft, you then take another break and, maybe have another coffee, although, don't go too heavy on the coffee. Then after you've taken that break, and again, that break between second and third draft might be, again, maybe an hour or two, it might be a little bit longer. Then your third draft, and this is where the cutting begins. So the first thing that you do is you cut out all your darlings. You take out all of those fancy phrases that mean nothing. And, we all write those. We can't help ourselves. A lot of the time it's, sort of verbal tics that we have, written tics. There are words, our own personal idiolect, if you like. Words like seemed, almost, perhaps, and, those other ones that you can see over there. A big one that I tend to overuse is that, and also simply. And just to, I overuse all of those, but as soon as you become aware of that, you can start cutting them out of your written work because they don't actually add anything. And if you're not sure which ones you should be cutting out, I definitely recommend the Hemingway app. And yeah, I am quite a fan of Ernest Hemingway. Well, he's writing anyway. But the Hemingway app, you can put in sentences or paragraphs of your writing, and it will then analyse it. It's all done online. It's completely free of charge. It'll analyse all of and pick out all of those sort of waffly phrases and help you to really begin to pin down and get to the heart of what it is you're really saying. Stephen King recommends that you cut out all adverbs. And if you've forgotten what an adverb is, it's essentially a word with ly at the end. So, like lovely, nicely, quietly, those types of words. And, most of the time that they don't add anything. She said it quietly. You might need it, but equally there could be another way of saying it that makes it far stronger. And certainly this is one of the things that Stephen King says. And if you've not, I know I've mentioned before his book on writing, well worth reading and highly recommended. Even though he's talking about fiction, he says some extremely useful things for all writing. So when he recommends cutting out adverbs, he actually shows some of his drafts of a piece. And in his early draft, adverbs are in there, lots of unnecessary words, lots of unnecessary sentences. And then he shows how in sort of subsequent drafts, he cuts out all of the adverbs. And then towards his final draft, he actually puts one or two back in. So, that's the thing. Yes, these are rules, but, sometimes rules need to be broken. So absolutely cut out the adverbs, cut out the unnecessary words, cut out the unnecessary sentences, be absolutely ruthless and pare down your writing. Get to the clear heart of what it is you're saying. And that's not to say that in a fourth final draft you could actually go back and add some of that in, but which is why you never throw anything away, but do cut things out, because all writing can be improved by paring it down. So the fourth draft, read it again. Does anything need to go back? So maybe an adverb or two, maybe a sentence that you thought was unnecessary, you now realise actually it is necessary. Do you need to add anything extra? Is there something that you now realise, and you've pared it down? Do you now realise that you've actually missed an entire section that really should have been in there? Is there something crucial that you forgot? This is now the point where you add it in. And also, do you have those photos that you took perhaps, or pictures that you drew, the diagrams? Have you sort of translated those diagrams from hand-drawn diagrams to maybe something that you've put together using, my personal favourite for drawing diagrams is, believe it or not, PowerPoint, because once I've put together that diagram, I can take a screenshot and use that. It's a really useful tool. What about text boxes in your article? Particularly if you're going to post it to somewhere like Medium, do you need to perhaps think about pull quotes, things that you think actually this would work well as the equivalent of a text box? But likewise, if it's something that's going to appear in a magazine layout, what bits are you going to put in as a text box? Is there a load of information that people would perhaps find useful to have that you don't really need to write down sort of in the main body of your article? And this is here where I'm thinking about things like reviews. A text box is an ideal place to put all of that sort of nuts and bolts information. Where can I buy this thing? How much does it cost? Who produces it, and so on. Or if it's a film or a TV show, where is it showing? Who's it aimed at? Maybe who the producers are or who the director is. Those types of things. Excuse me. So and are there fact boxes as well? We're quite familiar with this in articles that we read in hard copy and also online, where you get these sort of lists of facts. Things that you didn't know about, about medieval church. And again, this is maybe not something that you want to include in the main body of your article, but actually it's useful stuff that you discovered in the course of your research, and it works really well as just a straightforward text box that's just full of facts. Don't be afraid of including that. The final draft, so you've done all of that, it looks okay, it's got everything in that you wanted to cover, it's in the right order, it's the right words in the right order. Now what you need to do is proofread. And once you've proofread it once, you need to proofread it again. And definitely ask other people to have a look at it, to proofread it for you. Read it aloud to somebody. Reading aloud often helps. Not always, but often. But particularly if you know that you are someone that is perhaps not the best speller in the world, or your grammar is maybe not always spot on, then absolutely ask somebody else to have a look at it before you submit it. So, that's really key. Make sure that you have produced not just the best that you can do, but also don't be afraid of asking somebody else to cast their eye over it. This is why we have editors. And then finally, submit. And of course, if it's writing for our publication, writing in the media or Medium, the The process for doing that, if it's any publication on Medium, again, you know the process for doing that. If it's an article that you have got appearing in a newspaper or a magazine or another outlet, this is going to be your email where you've already organised your pitch, you've had your pitch accepted, you've been commissioned to write the piece. This is you writing the piece and finally submitting it. And I would recommend that you write the entire piece elsewhere. Don't write it in the body of your email. The same as a pitch. Don't write it in the body of your email. Instead, write it elsewhere, cut and paste, and then the last thing you do is put in the correct email address and make sure that everything is there. And then finally, as I say, click submit or send. Okay, so that's the end of this particular lecture. A little bit briefer, which I'm sure you're quite pleased about. But, you know, this, as I say, is the basic outline of how you might go together or go about starting from an idea to a final piece. And you know, that's a process that most of us who write a lot are quite familiar with. And the more that you do it, the better you get at it. And of course, that's why we have our publication, Writing in the Media, which is there for you to write as many pieces for as you would like. And I will see you in the seminars.